Good evening, students. Um, Good evening for a wonderful, bright session on GST. So we had an introduction session in the previous session, and now we'll proceed with the next session, which is on supply. Okay. So before starting the chapter, apologies firstly for being late. I was a little held up, so I had to join a little late. But we'll cover this up. Not to worry. We'll make we could see a lot of students joining in with a lot of enthusiasm. Good evening to everyone. So we will finish the session in a good spirit, and we will continue the supply chapter in the next session also. So I could see some questions. Before answering those questions, Mr. Ishan Bish, I'll answer your question. Also, if anybody has any queries in a previous session, because understanding the introduction is very much important, even though it's just an introduction, might not carry much of a marks for you, but it helps you to give that perspective, because we had done that comparison of the previous law with the current law, how the GST rate goes, how the input tax credit works. So it gives you, few feel and touch points of various things. So it is very important though that you understand the introduction very well. Okay. Uh, so we'll go to the queries. Mr. Ishan has asked, sir, GST Act came into force with the 101st Amendment Act. Correct. So it was the 101st Amendment Act. So what about 102nd Amendment? So what's the amendment after the act? No. So what happens is there are two series running in, Ishan, and everybody concentrate on this. There is a Constitution Amendment Bill. Okay. So there are a lot of bills which has been passed. So let's start from the first. First Constitution Amendment Bill was passed, then that got converted into Constitution Amendment Act. All of this happened after the Constitution was framed, right? First the Constitution was framed, then the Constitution Amendment happened. So as and when they saw that there was a need for amendment of the Constitution itself, okay, it is not so easy that like a budget, the act gets changed, but the Constitution doesn't get changed so frequently. So they'll have to have a consent from the Supreme Court, and only then they can make any amendment in the Constitution. So there was a Constitution Amendment Bill. It got passed as Constitution Amendment Act. Second Constitution Amendment Bill, then Constitution Amendment Act. Third Constitution Amendment Bill, and third Constitution Amendment Act. Okay, so like this it goes on. But say at the 50th Amendment Bill was passed, but to make it effective, what did I say? To make it effective, you need the assent of both the houses and the president's assent. Now, if this 50th bill has not got the assent, then what will happen? Will it be a 50th act? It will not be a 50th act. There'll be a gap. Then 51st Amendment Bill will come, and the Amendment Act will be 50th Act, because that Amendment Act series has to get continued, right? So 51st Amendment Bill, then 50th Act. Like that, it happens. So say again at the 100th bill, what will it be here? 59th, 98th Act on the, because there is one gap running in, right? So when the 100th bill did not get passed, then it will be 98th Act. So like that, the gap increased, and that's why 122nd Amendment Bill, when it got passed, it became 101st Amendment Act. Okay, so there are two series running, Amendment Bill and Amendment Act. So 122nd Amendment Bill, which was passed, and it got approved as 101st Amendment Act. So there's no subsequent amendment which happened. So it is the Amendment Bill which got passed as an act. The act is 101st Amendment Act. Okay, hope this is clear, Ishan. Darshan's question is it mandatory for the states to implement the same GST rates equal to that of the central government? Yes, it is in a way compulsory, because they have a GST council. Who is sitting in the GST council? The central officers are sitting, the central government is sitting, there is a finance minister, also the respective state ministers also are sitting, right? So when they are sitting and consenting and agreeing there, then they cannot come and say we'll have a different rate. So there'll be total misclassification or total destruction of the GST rates and the GST Act. That's why in the council itself, they will decide the rates and they will implement the act. So whatever is implemented by the center will be implemented by the states as well. So Delhi and Ladakh both are union territories. So UT GST and CGST should be levied on supply of goods and services in both UTs. But sir, in Delhi, CGST and SGST is levied on supply. Why is it so? Very good questions, Bhumika. So we had said that in Union Territory, we will discuss this later on. But okay, since you've asked the question now, we can discuss. Wherever, what is the definition of state? What is generally discussed as a state is a state which is called as a state, and union territories are treated as union territories. They are not treated as state. But for GST purpose, the definition of GST, definition of state means every state and every union territory which has a legislature. Because union territories which have their own legislature, they will tell that we need to have our own collection, we need to have our own act. So like Delhi and Pondicherry is another example, wherein these two union territories, they are UTs, but they have their own legislature. So they will have their own state, their own GST law, which will be called as state GST law. Like Delhi is a union territory, but it is with a legislature. So it will have Delhi GST Act. That's the reason when you see any supply from Delhi and Ladakh also, that is also union territory with GST. So Delhi, Ladakh and Pondicherry, these three union territories will have their own GST law, and it will be called as a state because it can have their own GST law. Clear, Ms. Bhumika? If an intermediary resells the goods at loss, then there is no value addition. Then does that mean he's not liable to pay GST? He will be liable to pay GST, Darshan, as we had seen that the GST is levied on the outward supply. Okay, so whenever he sells, even if he sells at a loss, he's selling at some value, right? He's bought it at 100 rupees. Now he's selling at say 80 rupees. On the 80 rupees, he will have to charge GST. So his credit will be more and his output will be less. That's fine. What is composition levy? Composition levy we had discussed, right? Like a restaurant or another small scale traders, जिनको rate ज्यादा rate नहीं pay कर सकते, उनके लिए एक composition scheme है, which says that up to 1.5 crores you can opt for composition scheme, wherein you will get credit. You will not get credit, but the rate of tax will be very less. So if I'm a say supplier of steel, iron and steel, say for me the rate is 5%, but for a composition person, the rate will be at a lower rate, which is 1%. So that's a composition scheme. GSPs and ASPs we have discussed, these are all GST Suvidha providers who help in connecting your software with the GST portal. If you have huge number of data, you cannot exchange directly input the data. You can't do a data entry. Even if you use Excel for uploading, that will not be sufficient. That's the reason these GSPs, ASPs handshake your system with the portal and help you transmit the data, right? What is composition cess? Composition levy is different, composition cess. So when GST had come in, there was a lot of additional revenues which was required for the state, but the center couldn't give it. So the center said that apart from CGST, SGST, IGST, and UTGST, we'll have one more component called composition cess, wherein on specified goods like aerated drinks, high luxury cars, there will be some additional levy. Say if it is 28%, then we'll have additional cess of 12%. This is an additional levy on certain luxury products. So this is called as composition cess. Union territories have different rates? No, union territories will have the same rate as the state itself. How is GST different from VAT? How the cost of goods to consumer is less in GST as compared to VAT? Give us one example. Mr. Malay, I had given this example in the last session, wherein we saw that the input tax credit on GST, okay, is available to anybody, while under the VAT system, they used to get exposed to excise duty, which was not claimable. So if you just see the recording of the previous session, which is already live on the YouTube, you will get to know on this complete clarity. I have shared a complete working with numbers, with practical experience, with practical case studies. So please refer the previous class. You will understand what is the difference between GST and VAT and how the rate is reduced in GST. But sir, in respective minister is only finance minister seat ना, okay? दूसरा minister भी also seat in GST council. दूसरा मिनिस्टर भी बैठ सकता है. whoever is recommended by the respective state, वो जिनको recommend करते हैं वो वहां पे बैठ सकते हैं. Good. Actually, my question is not relevant for November 23 exam. My question is May 23 exam. Video statutory update is covered in relevant video and a separate video because. Okay, let me just see this, Adarsh. Can intermediary claim input tax credit on sold goods sold? Anybody can claim. So there's nothing as such an intermediary. Any person who is trading other than a manufacturer, anybody else, if you're saying intermediary, that will not be correct because a manufacturer, a wholesaler, a distributor, a retailer, a service provider, all are on equal footing in GST. So anybody who is buying something and selling something, right, in the business sense, where what they do, they can claim the input tax credit and they will have to charge the output tax credit on output tax on whatever value of goods they sell. Composition levy, yeah, we'll discuss on composition levy limits. There you will get to know that there are some states, the levy, the value, the threshold is different, but the rate is same. Okay, so composition levy, the rate is same, the threshold is different. For some states it is 10 lakhs, for some states it is 20 lakhs. Rushita Sharma, what is input tax credit? Input tax credit means what we purchase. When we purchase, what taxes we pay. That is claimable. That is called input tax credit. Again, for you, we have a video of the previous session. Please go through it to understand it in detail. Great. Jeevan, your question is very valid. If UT has legislative and can make their own GST, then who will make for UT which does not have legislature? So it will be made by the central government itself. So each UT will have its own UT GST law, which will be prepared by the central government because UT is governed by a governor there. So that governor or lieutenant governor who's appointed, this is not power to make the laws. So UT laws which have no legislature are made by the central government. Is it necessary to remember the section number? Important sections you will have to remember, okay? And but not all the sections, but it is very much encouraged that you understand and concentrate on those sections because when we are discussing supply, we'll touch section 7. And when you go to input tax credit, we will generally refer to section 7, right? So you should get that connection that what is section 7 is a supply and section 9 is a charging section. So those important sections is what you will have to remember. Is composition scheme and composition levy same? Yes, composition scheme and composition levy is same. Okay, so let's get into today's discussion on supply. So very good that a lot of people have gone through on our previous sessions and based on that you have asked questions. That's really encouraging. Please go through the study material once after the classes so that you will understand it completely and whatever things have been left out. So you will have that interest in reading it so that you'll remember it for a longer duration. So after the class, make a practice that we have a day's gap, right? At least for today's class, we have 2 days gap. So go through it and work out on the problems. Try to work out some questions on that, and then you see that your grasping power will definitely increase. How to remember special category states? There is a formula or there is some shortcut which is there. So which I will explain you when we go to the threshold limit, wherein you will understand what are the special category states and how to remember them. Okay, so let's get into supply. What is supply? Okay, so under various laws, there has to be a trigger point or there has to be a charging levy or when will the GST, when will the tax be charged, right? So in every act, there is a point when taxes are levied. Like in example, income tax. When do you pay your income tax? When you earn some income. So the trigger point or the charging, the levy point is when you earn some income. When you earn income, you pay your income tax. Okay. Similarly, under excise duty, customs and service tax, and also under sales tax laws, these are the old laws wherein there used to be a specific taxable event. If the taxable event triggers, then the tax was payable. Now, what is the taxable event in excise duty. What is excise duty? The tax which you pay on manufacturing of goods is the excise duty. Okay, so on excise duty, the taxable event is manufacturing of goods. If you manufacture goods, then you pay excise duty. If you don't manufacture the goods, you don't pay excise duty. So what is the trigger point for excise duty? Manufacturing. The taxable event is manufacturing of goods. So is it applicable on manufacturing of services? No. The Act specifically used the words manufacture of goods. So it means only on manufacture of goods, excise duty would be levied. Customs duty, when is customs duty levied? What is the taxable event of customs duty? That is that event which is on import and export of goods. So as soon as you import, you have we had given that example, right? As soon as I input, there is a customs officer who's standing there who will let you inside the goods only if you pay duty. So he will be the assessing officer who will assess the goods and levy tax on that. Okay, so the taxable event is import. After import, will there be levied any customs duty? No, because once I have imported, means I have cleared the goods, then I don't have to pay any customs duty. And similarly on exports also they can levy duty, but the rate schedule is as of now saying on all goods the rate is 0. So except some goods which have to be restricted, on that restricted goods there will be export duty. Otherwise, on all goods there is no export duty. Okay, but the taxable event is both. Rate is 0, that's a different issue, but the taxable event for customs is import and export of goods. Okay, then in case of service tax, what was the levy? Taxable event was rendering of service. Once you render a service, there is a levy of service tax. Under sales tax or VAT, okay, the taxable event was transfer of ownership, which means once you sell off the goods, you give off the goods to anyone. That is the taxable event for sales tax. So there are various trigger points or taxable events under the earlier law, but the taxable event under GST is supply. So once you make any supply or once you supply something, then you have to pay GST. Okay. Now, supply provision is very much important because that is the base provision which says that what is the tax payable on what transaction. Okay, that transaction, because now we are merging all the previous laws together. Now we will encourage that, yes, we had a deep discussion on the old laws, right? So under old laws, we had complete discussion on various events. Okay, so to merge all of that is what we have GST. So in GST, the definition of supply covers goods, services, sale, service, lease, everything is covered. That's the reason it has a holistic definition. Now, supply, to understand supply, we have to read the definition of supply, because the definition of supply is so very important that we read it, we will understand major part of it, and there's no further deliberation which is required. So I've reproduced the section 7 as is. So what is supply? Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both. So first 7, what is one? Subsection 1, 771 A, B, C. So it's divided into 7A, 7AA, 7B, 7C. So 7.1 has 4 parts. Section 7, subsection 1 says supply. Supply includes all form of supply of goods or services or both, such as means what? It's giving an example. So supply kya bolta hai? Let's first understand in English, then I'll try to tell in Hindi. Supply includes all form of supply of goods or services or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal, made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Okay, so supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services. Okay, it includes all forms. So it could include either supply of goods only or services only or mix of both. So anything what you move, okay, all forms of supply of goods or services, such as, which means it's giving certain examples. So apart from these 8 categories, so there are 8 terms which is given. Apart, these 8 terms are supply because these are all just examples. But apart from this 8, if there's any other category which is coming, that will also be treated as supply, because it doesn't say is, It doesn't say all forms of goods or supplies, which is sale or thing. It says all form of supply of goods or services, such as. Okay, so such as means it's giving an example. This example itself is so very exhaustive that it covers everything. But still, they've said that it is just such as all forms of supply of goods or services, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal. What is the difference and what is the meaning of each of these words? We'll discuss, but just read the question section properly now. Such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal, made or agreed to be made. What does it mean? If I make the sale now, if I make the supply now, or I agree to make in the future. When will I agree to make something in the future? When I receive advance. If I have received advance and have agreed to make some sale for the future, that is also covered. That is also covered as supply. Made or agreed to be made for a consideration, underlined word. So you could also underline in your respective notebooks, for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. So the two things which are important, three things. One is supply of goods or services. Second is it should be for a consideration. And third is it should be in the course or furtherance of business. If it is not for a consideration, then it will not be supply. And secondly, if it is for a consideration, but it is not in the course of business, then also it's not a supply. So supply should fulfill these three legs. Okay. So this I will explain in Hindi for convenience of people who are asking to repeat the explanation in Hindi. So supply क्या बताता है? Supply बताता है कि supply is all forms of supply of goods. Supply हर तरह का supply है जो कि है जैसे, such as means जैसे, मतलब ये example देता है कि सेल है, ट्रांसफर है, बार्टर, एक्सचेंज, लाइसेंस, रेंटल, लीज और डिस्पोजल, ये 8 क्लॉजेस जो है इस तरीके से आप सप्लाई कर सकते हो. कैसे कैसे कर सकते हो? ये 8 तरीके से आप सप्लाई कर सकते हो. किसके? मेड और अग्रीड टू बी मेड, मतलब मैं आज करूंगा या फ्यूचर में करूंगा. फॉर अ कंसिडरेशन, मतलब कुछ तो कंसिडरेशन आना चाहिए. डज इट से मॉनेटरी कंसिडरेशन? नहीं, ये मॉनेटरी कंसिडरेशन नहीं बोलता है. It says for a consideration, मतलब it can be for monetary or non monetary consideration. क्योंकि बार्टर है, बार्टर का मतलब क्या है? आपको कैश में नहीं आएगा. तो नॉन कैश ट्रांजैक्शंस जो आप कुछ सप्लाई करते हो और सामने वाला आपको कुछ देता है, वो भी एक कंसिडरेशन ही कहा जाएगा. ओके, फॉर अ कंसिडरेशन बाय अ पर्सन. पर्सन का मतलब क्या हो गया? जो हम इनकम टैक्स में पढ़ते हैं वो पर्सन वाला डेफिनेशन नहीं. यहाँ पे पर्सन का मतलब होता है टैक्सेबल पर्सन. ओके, बाय अ पर्सन इन द कोर्स ऑफ फर्दरेंस ऑफ बिजनेस, मतलब बिजनेस में या बिजनेस के साथ रहना चाहिए, तभी वो सप्लाई कहा जाएगा. ठीक है. तो सेम थिंग आई हैड एक्सप्लेन इन इंग्लिश एंड हिंदी. सो सप्लाई इंक्लूड्स फर्स्ट 7(1)(a) all forms. So we'll discuss these 8 terms. Made or agreed to be made, it should be for a consideration, and it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Second, it says the activities or transactions by a person other than an individual to its members or constituents, okay, or vice versa, for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration. So the tax laws are little worded in a dry manner, so you will not understand it at the first instance. So if you keep applying and understand the examples, then it will be, you will understand it. So activities are transactions by a person other than an individual to its members or constituents. Matlab, who will make supply to its members? So if there is an association or if there is a club, okay, any activities or transactions by a person other than an individual. So by who will be other than an individual? It will be an association or somebody. So any activities or transactions by an association to its members, right? So if there's an association and it's providing any service to its members, or members are providing to its association for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration, is all any supply between a individual to its members will be a supply. But then there was a judgment under the Supreme Court called as Calcutta Club case, wherein they said when an association is providing any service to its members, it is mutually between itself, because it's not providing any service to its outsiders. So we will not treat it as a supply, we will not treat it as a service, and there will not be any service tax. So that the impact of that should not come to GST. That's the reason it has been said that in GST also, if there is any supply to do away with the implication of Calcutta Club on GST, they've said that any supply between an association to its members or members to its association is also a supply. Okay, here it doesn't use for a consideration or it doesn't use in the course of furtherance of business. So we for a member and association that will not apply. Okay, then third leg is import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course of furtherance of business. So import of services, import of goods, we know that once we get the goods cleared and at the time of clearance itself, GST will be applicable. But in case of import of services, what will happen? Import of services for a consideration. So if I do any import, which is for consideration, if it is free, no GST because it says for a consideration. So there has to be a consideration. If I download anything free, right? Import of services, if I take any services outside India and I get it to India and I don't pay any consideration, then no GST because there is no consideration for that. When will GST come? In this case of import of services, there has to be a consideration, whether or not in the course of business, which means if I import and if I pay some consideration, if it is in the course of business, definitely GST. But it also says that if you import something for a consideration and it is not for business, not for business ka matlab kya ho gaya? If it is not for business, then what is it for? It is for personal purpose. So even if it is for personal purposes, then also GST is applicable. Now, who will pay GST if it's personal purpose? So I imported something, sir, and I have paid some paid a consideration also, and it is not for business. So should I pay GST? Whether you have to pay GST or somebody else, that is not the point which we are discussing. We're seeing that it is a supply. Who will pay taxes? We'll discuss on that later on. But GST is a continuous series. The whole chapters are interlinked. If you just say that I will read supply, I will not read other chapters, you will not understand the whole logic of GST because each supply, input tax credit, registration, all of these are interlinked topics. Okay, so you have to read it all to get a holistic answer. So import of services, what you understood, import of services should be for a consideration and it can be in the course of business or it can be non-business. It could be for personal use, still GST is payable. Then there is a section 7.1 subsection C, which says activities specified in schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration. Okay, so activities specified in schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration is also a supply. So if I do some activities, what are those activities? Those activities are specified in schedule 1. Now those activities, when I am agreed to be made without consideration, because what we said, there has to be two links. It should be consideration and in the course of business. So one link we said it should be consideration, but business is not relevant criteria. What is that category? That is import of service. Then there is a third category which says that activities which are specified in schedule 1, it should be made, it can be made with or without consideration, but it should be in the course of business because it doesn't say anything. It means in the course of business is definitely required. The activity specified in schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration is also a supply. Okay, now correct. So many queries again. What is meant by entry number here? Entry number means this entry number. This is the entry number in the schedule. So this is only for reference that if you have a constitution, we have a constitution. In constitution, 7th schedule has the power to levy tax. So 7th schedule is here, right? In the 7th schedule, which entry, which means what is the line number in that schedule, which is the charging power. That is what is the reference of entry number here. Under GST, taxable event is supply under section 7. Correct. Personal bhi hua to bhi supply. Yes, personal hua to bhi supply. What is deferred payment? Which means the payment is not happening now, it's happening in the future. That is the meaning of deferred payment. Can you explain double A again? Yes. Double A says activities are transactions. So if you read it from starting, it means supply includes the activities or transactions by a person other than an individual to its members or constituents or vice versa for cash, deferred payment, or other valuable consideration. So activities are transactions by a person other than an individual, which means a association providing services to its members. Like you have a club. Now, all the members are the club. Members are the people who are paying a kind of entry fees for the becoming a member, right? Now, these members come together and form this association or form a club. Now, any supply made by the club to its members is also liable to GST. Why it is specifically mentioned here is, if not this clause, then the members would say that we ourselves have formed an association. We are a mutual understanding club wherein I don't sell anything to outsiders. I put some money as a membership fees. I put some money as my contribution, and the club collects something collectively. When they bought, they have paid GST. Now, when the club is again supplying to me, there should not be any GST. But GST law says no, there are two transactions. When the club buys some goods from outsider, the club is buying. Now, club, when it is supplying something to you, it's a different supply. This supply transaction between the club to you is also a supply. Okay, so that's the reason double A is a more of a clarificatory nature, but which is already included in A, right? If you see, it is already included in A. It says sale by any person to any person. Okay, by a person. So who is a person? Even association also is a person. Then the association, when it's applying to its member, it is liable to GST, right? But double A is coming as a special cautious, saying that the clubs cannot say that we are not covered. To cover them, double A is also amended and included. Why? Import of goods for consideration not included. Import of goods, whether or not for a consideration, is included. For consideration is definitely included, Abhirami. For a consideration, whether or not in the course of business. So for import of services is what is mentioned here. But your question is import of goods is not included, because when you import, when we'll see that in IGST, there is a provision that on import, it is always treated as an interstate transaction. And there under IGST, there is a levy similar to what is levy under CGST. There is a levy in IGST. It says that on import of goods also GST is leviable, and it shall be levied at the same rate. It shall be levied on the same value on which customs duty is levied. So IGST also includes there that import of goods for a consideration, whether or not in the course of business, is liable for customs duty plus IGST. So that is there in IGST. Your person represents individual or other than individual. Same, it includes everybody. It includes individual and non-individual. It doesn't mean a natural, artificial, natural person. Any artificial judicial person is also a person itself. Okay. Then 7.1 we understood. Now to understand 7.1, we have to, we can understand this with a chart. So it will be clear for you to understand. So what is 7.1? We discussed that 7.1a says supply of goods or services. There should be supply, means there has to be supply of goods or services, right? It should be for a consideration. 7.1a, we are still in 7.1a itself, supply of goods or services for consideration, and it should be in the course or furtherance of business, right? So these three things are essential for a supply. Supply means any supply means movement, all forms of supply of goods or services. So what is supply? Supply of all forms of goods or services for a consideration and in the course or furtherance of business. These three elements will make it as a supply. Then we saw that these are three things which are important. Now we understood 7.1a completely. Now there is one instance which says that import of services for a consideration whether or not in the course of business also is supply. And then there is one more category, that schedule 1 category, wherein if you are making without a consideration also it will become a supply. Okay, what is that schedule we'll understand, but understand the basic structure of section 7. Okay, you understood the basic structure, then we'll proceed further. So this was 7.1. Then 7.1a. 7.1a says that, now what is this 1.1.2? I understand. 7.1 subclause A also understand. What is this double A? Why did they bring A, then double A, then B? They could have just brought A, B, C, D, or they could have brought 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. But what is the meaning of this 7.1a? Whenever these extra clauses has been added, it means there was an amendment. It was not there in the original law. So 7.1a, B, C was there. They wanted to amend and bring something. That's when they introduced double A. Now 7.1 was there, 7.2 was there. They wanted to bring something in between. That's when they brought this 7.1a. So whenever this alteration, A series amendment is there, it means it's an amendment. Okay. Any law for that matter. There is AB, AC, then there is ABA sometimes, right? Subclauses of the income tax, so many subclauses are there. A, B, AC is there, then ABA comes in, which means AB, AC was there before. ABA was an amendment which came in later on. So similar to that, 7.1, 7.2 was there. 7.1a is an amendment, and it said that where certain activities or transactions constitute a supply in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1, okay, where certain activities or transactions constitute a supply in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1, they shall be treated either as supply of goods or supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. Okay, where certain activities or transactions, okay, some activity or transaction has taken place which constitute a supply in accordance with subsection 1. Now, there is a Schedule 2 which is being introduced here, which says that they shall be treated either of supply of goods or supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. So what does subclause 2.7.2 say is that wherever there is a supply under 7.1, now to classify whether it is goods or services, go to Schedule 2. So these are all directory sections which says that supply you have discussed and defined and empowered and given the power in 7.1. Now come to 7.1a, and I will tell you whether whatever transactions you're doing, is it supply of goods or services. So Schedule 2 is what? Schedule 2 is a classification schedule to give you broad classifications of what is goods and what is services. Okay. Then subclause 2, 7.2. 7.2 says that notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, which means what other than what is mentioned in 7.1, activities or transactions specified in Schedule 3 or such activities or transactions undertaken by the central government, state government, or local authority in which they are engaged as public authority. Means when the government is engaged as a public authorities, as may be notified, and it should be notified, it shall be treated neither a supply of goods nor supply of services. So what did we do? 7.1a, 7.1 we read on supply. 7.1a we are treating this, we are talking about distinction between goods and services. Now comes 7.2. It's saying that some activities and government functions will not be treated as goods nor services, which means what? So Schedule 3 is a exemption schedule, or it's giving you a schedule of things which will not be treated as supply itself. So Schedule 3 is not an exemption schedule, sorry, it is a schedule which says that this is not a supply itself. So Schedule 3 is popularly called as out of scope supply, which means it is outside the syllabus or outside the scope of supply itself. Clear? Then 7.3. 7.3 says subject to the provisions of 1, 1a and 2, whatever we have read, subject to that, the government may or may not, the government may, on the recommendation of the council, who is the council? GST council. On the recommendation of the council, specify by notification the transactions that are to be treated as supply of goods and not supply of services, or supply of services and not supply of goods. Okay, so if there is tomorrow any dispute or there is a loss of revenue because rate of goods is more and so rate of services is less. People will tell I'm supplying service, but actually it is supply of goods. To do away with that leakage, this is being included in 7.3, which says that subject to the provisions of 1(1)(a) and 2, the government may, on the recommendations of the council, specify by notification. So the government may notify that certain transactions will be treated as supply of goods only and not of services, like real estate contracts, right? Real estate, you cannot tell that when you're doing any real estate business, you're supplying sand, bricks, and things like that. You're actually not supplying sand, bricks. You're constructing a building and supplying the whole building. So it's a supply of service. Okay, so this is already there in Schedule 2. Now it can be clarified that because of this power under 7.3, they can say that supply of services. What is supply of services and what is supply of goods? Okay, so this is the whole section of 7.1, 7.1a, 7.2, and 7.3. Now let us understand this again. Parameters of supply. Supply includes supply of all goods or services for a consideration which is made or agreed to be made in the course or furtherance of business. This is 7.1. Then 7.1b gives an exception of in the course or furtherance of business, which is import of services. Import of services, but for a consideration not in the course or furtherance of business, is also supply. How do you understand this? What could be import of services without in the course of business, but not without consideration? No, with consideration, but not in the course of business, which means what? Like I have this Spotify. Spotify, say it is a non-Indian company. It is outside India. I am using it for my personal purposes and I'm paying some subscription charges. So if I'm paying some subscription charges, that becomes a consideration. So it is in the supply of goods or services. It is for a consideration, but not for business, because I'm using it for my personal music listening. So it is not in the course of furtherance of business. So it is liable to GST. Generally, if it is not in the course of furtherance of business, it is outside GST. But Schedule 7.1b said that no. Even if it is not in the course of furtherance of business, okay, if it is import of service, only then it will be liable to GST as well. So who will pay GST? That comes the question. Will I pay? No, because I'm using for my personal purposes. How will I pay? If I pay, then I will claim the credit. So I will not pay because it is for my personal purposes. If it is my business purpose, definitely I'll claim the credit. But if it is for my personal purposes, then the supplier. Okay, so these specialized services are called online information database access and retrieval services. So these services, when the supplier provides to any customer in India, then the supplier has to appoint an authorized person in India and he has to register and pay GST. So in case of not in the import of services, not in the course of furtherance of business, will be paid by the supplier in specified services. Okay, then we will see what is exception for consideration. The exception for consideration came in Schedule 1 through Section 7.1c. What does 7.1c say? That subject to the provisions of above, transactions which are mentioned in Schedule 1 will be treated as supply even if there is no consideration. Okay, so Schedule 1 says that even if it is not for a consideration, because two limbs in the course of furtherance of business and consideration. Now it is in the course of furtherance of business, but there is no consideration, but still pay GST. How? Follow the valuation rules. What all things have to follow valuation rules? Those items what is mentioned in Schedule 1. Okay, what is mentioned in Schedule 1? For that, I will pay GST even if there is no consideration. Let us understand, see the Schedule 1, then we will understand it clearly. Schedule 1, which means activities without consideration, which is permanent transfer or disposal of assets. We know that in such cases, there will not be consideration. That's why the government is saying that in such cases, even if there is no consideration, I will treat it as supply. So I will give you the valuation rules. I will give you the guidance on value. Based on that, you pay GST. Okay. So permanent transfer or disposal of assets. So if I'm selling off some assets, I'm disposing it off, for which I am not getting any consideration. Okay. So it should be disposal or transfer of business assets. Transfer or disposal must be permanent. and ITC must have been availed. Only then it will be available as a then it is liable to GST. So what is the logic? The government is saying, boss, when you purchased any capital goods or purchased any goods, I gave you the credit, right? I gave you the input tax credit with the bharosa that you will sell it. Now, if you are, you will use it for your business. Now, if you are not selling it and you're not using it for your business and disposing it off, then please pay me the GST on input tax what I have paid. Okay, so there is a formula which says that how much GST has to be paid. But now permanent transfer or disposal of assets, the point we are talking is if it is without consideration, bhaiya, tab bhi you have to pay GST. Okay. Then supply between related persons or distinct persons. It should be made in the course of furtherance of business. So supply between related persons. Who are related? We'll see that definition later on. But understand that any transaction between related persons or distinct persons. What is this distinct persons? We have not heard of this term distinct person. Distinct person means a person who is having a branch or a kind of a branch or any other registered business within the same state, right? So I am in Karnataka. I have a branch office. I am having my business in Bangalore. I have a branch office in Hubli. Now, any transaction between, and Hubli is a separate thing, and I've taken a registration there. Then it becomes a distinct person. So any transaction I do between Bangalore and Hubli, I have to charge GST because it's a distinct person. Now, within the same state, if I don't take two separate registrations and I take one registration, then I will not be treated as a distinct person. It will be treated as supply within myself. एक pocket से लेके दूसरे pocket में डाल दिया. I've taken from one pocket and put it in another pocket. No GST is applicable. So that is the subtle difference between a distinct person. A person is treated as a distinct person if I make supply to him and he is having a separate registration. If he is not having a separate registration, then he's not a distinct person because there's no loss to the government, right? I am transferring some goods to him and he is selling it. Whatever sales he will do, I will report it together in my entity. So there's no loss. But if it's a different GST registered entity, and if I supply to him without consideration, right? But there is a loss to the revenue. How will I control those goods? That's why they've said that any supply between distinct persons is liable to GST. Another instance of distinct person is when I am in one state and supplying to my branch which is outside the state. So that branch which is outside the state will be treated as a taxable person and it will be treated as a distinct person. So if I do any branch transfer of goods or provide any services, even if there is no consideration, still GST is payable. How is it payable? Based on the valuation rules. Okay. So that is permanent transfer or disposal of assets and supply between related person or distinct person. Third point is person, principal or agent. Schedule 1, third point says that transactions between principal and agent, only supply of goods and not supply of services. So principal and agent, if they're doing any transactions of goods, then it is, even if it's without consideration, will be treated as supply. Then importation of services. Importation of services is there, no sir, in 71AA, 71B. Yes, it is there in 71B as import with consideration for non-business. Now here it says import without consideration, but for business. So दोनों जगह पे covered है. Nahi, it's not covered at both the places. Here it is covered when only specific cases. Import of services from related persons to establishments located outside India. Okay. From imported from related persons or establishments located outside India. Matlab, there should be two parties who are related. One branch outside and one entity here having a branch office here or having a subsidiary here, they are related. So import from related persons or establishment outside India, if I do any import of goods or services, or no, this is only basically of importation of services from a related party. And if there is no consideration, that is also supply. The condition is you both should be related parties. Okay, then it will be treated as supply. So importation from related person or establishments located outside India is liable for GST. So this is 71C Schedule 1. Was it too very heavy? Oh, okay. So many queries. If club collects money from the members to buy a product and on giving it to its members, if club does not get any consideration, then is it escaping 1A section as AA says there is a need for consideration to fall under that preview? Yes, very good example. So club is buying and club is giving to its members without consideration, right? If it is giving to its members without consideration, then there will not be any GST because there is no consideration which is involved. Good analysis, Stephen. The things in 7.2 are not treated as supply of goods or services. Correct. 7.2 refers to Schedule 3. The Schedule 3 also will see Mr. Singh Ravi Rajiv that things what are there in Schedule 3, okay, are outside the scope of GST. So government will decide which is supply of goods and which is supply of services if they want to. Mr. Ishan, if they want to, then they have power under 7.3 to decide that, okay, if there is any confusion, we will notify saying that this is only supply of goods, not services. This is only services, not goods. They have that power. Like Netflix subscription, yeah, that is also a good example. Import of goods for personal use, then is it supply or no? Import of goods firstly is outside the scope of GST because on import, what do you pay? You pay customs duty, and then it is for personal use. Import of goods हो गया तो customs duty लग गया. अगर customs duty है, then GST भी है. So on customs duty है, तो फिर GST भी है because it goes along. In IGST will read that import of GST on import is applicable when the customs duty is levied. As soon as the customs duty is levied, IGST भी साथ में लग गया है. Okay. But you're actually not paying for using Spotify services unless it's a premium pack. Correct. So if it's a premium pack, you pay it, right? On the premium pack, you pay the Spotify company will pay GST on that. They have to come to India and register and pay the GST. Distinct person mean transferred to branch office, right? Within same state, same, correct. Within the same state, if it is registered, then it's a distinct person. Outside the state, very good question. Now, outside the state, if that other branch is not registered, still it will be treated as a distinct person. So the distinct person are two things. One is within the state, separately registration is taken, then it's a distinct person. Within the same state, no separate registration, then it is not a distinct person. And outside the state, whether registered or not registered, it will be a distinct person itself. Okay. On disposing business asset, if I dispose building used for business, will that also be supply? Building is an immovable property, right? Once a building is constructed and if you sell the building, then it's an immovable property. In Schedule 1, Schedule 3, which is the out of scope supply, they say that on immovable property, there is no GST. Okay. But if you're saying, if you're disposing any other movable business assets, then GST will be applicable. Related person means family member, right? Related person means family member for an individual, but for a non-individual, it is a detailed discussion. What is principal and agent, sir? Principal and agent means I am supplying something. Now, how much can I supply? I need some agent to supply. So this agent is acting on my behalf. He is a different person, but he's acting on my behalf. He is an agent. So any supply between this principal and agent is covered there. So all taxable supplies are taxable. Yeah, all supplies are taxable, but they have to meet the criteria of in the course of furtherance of business, and it should be for a consideration. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. Principal and agent like consignor and consignee. Consignor and consignee are little different. Principal and agent are little different. So consignor is one who takes the goods. Consignor and consignee are two people. Person who gives the goods is a consignor and the person who receives the goods is a consignee. In between the consignor and consignee, there will be some travel agent or a goods transport agency. But principal and agent means I am a principal. I am a dealer selling of air conditioners. Now I will have an agent who will sell goods on my behalf. So he is an agent. Okay. Any person who acts on behalf of the principal is an agent. Now, if this agent acts principally that I will buy goods from you and I will pay you consideration and I will sell at my margin, then he's not a principal and agent. A principal and agent relationship is when the agent acts on my behalf. He's an agent. If any supply included in 7.1c, then will it be taxable? No. 7.1c. Now, what does 7.1c says? Schedule 1, activities without consideration. So if these activities are without consideration, then it will be taxable. Yes, Neha, it will be taxable. Even if there is no consideration. If there is consideration, it is already falling under 7.1a, right? Now, if there is no consideration, it will fall under 7.1c and it will be taxable. Okay, so we were on the supply front. Supply, 1 minute. We'll go back to the first slide. 7.1 we understood. Supply includes all form of supply of goods or services such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal. Activities are transactions. Then 7.1 itself has 4 subclauses: A, AA, B, and C. AA says that transactions between association and an individual is liable to GST. Import of services, okay, not in the course of business, is also liable to GST. And Schedule 1 items, no consideration, still it will be liable to GST. That is 7.1. Then 7.1a says that activities or transactions constitute supply in accordance with the provisions of 1. Classification will be given in Schedule 2. Then clause B, second, 7.2 says that activities or transactions specified in Schedule 3 are those notified by the government or government services will be treated neither as supply of goods nor services. Schedule 3 also will go through in detail. Then subject to 7.1a and 1a and 2, the government will decide what is supply of goods or services and goods, they will decide it. Okay, so we understood this parameters of supply. 7.2 transactions out of scope of supply, which is Schedule 3. Now to understand further, we have to understand the definition of goods and services. Before that, there are some questions. What if building are held as stock in trade? Then will this still amount out of scope? No. If it is held as stock in trade, right, still it will be treated, because unlike income tax, GST is not based on business. GST is based on the nature. So building is immovable property. If it is held as stock or if it is held as capital goods, still it is a immovable property, and GST on immovable property is not there. So even if your building is held as stock in trade, you don't have to pay GST on it. Could you give one example of importation of services? This Netflix, Spotify, these are the examples of import of services. Further examples would be wherein I have taken some services of a lawyer. Now I want to take some services of a foreign lawyer for my business in India. He's sitting in US and is providing me some services. Okay, I want to just understand what is the financial viability of my product if I have to go to US, and product feasibility. What are the legal laws of that country? So I appoint a lawyer. Now he gives me advice. So this is an example of importation of service. Okay. Other example could be any services, like if I download some softwares from outside, if you're downloading some software, they are all examples of import of services, right? Or other thing could be when a company is there and it has a branch outside India, or it has an associated company. Now this associated company is buying all the services like software services, hosting services, internet services, email services. It is buying for all the branches across the country, across the globe, and it's cross charging me, or it is charging me for my share, right? So I am importing that and I'm paying something, right? Why do I pay? Because I take some services. So just understand that how does the flow works. Whoever pays the money is the person who is importing, because when will you pay? When you're getting something in return. So person who pays is getting something in return. He will be treated as importer of services. So in such example where there's a group of companies, one company is buying, procuring software on behalf of everybody, and it charges to the Indian company for its shares. It means that I am a receiver of services and I am importing some services and I'm paying something. So that's another example of importation of service. Under construction building per GST लगता है? Yes. On under construction, GST is leviable. GST is not leviable once it is completely constructed. Once you get the occupancy certificate, after that GST is not applicable, because till that point of time it is treated as a supply of services. So GST clearly gives that distinction, saying that if it's a building which is constructed, land, on that GST is not applicable. Kiran Shukla, what is your query? Is there GST for exportation of goods? No. On exportation of goods, there is no GST. On exportation of services also, there is no GST. Give one example for without consideration one. Import without consideration, Spotify. I've downloaded, I'm using the app, and I'm using the basic services without consideration. So no GST there, right? But if I do schedule one activities, now this importation is not there. Now last leg of schedule one, we saw that importation of services is there, but there is this schedule one. Yeah, here it is there. Importation activities without consideration, importation of services, but it should be between related parties. So if I gave you that example, no, that foreign company who is buying the software and charging me something. So if it is charging me something and I don't pay for it, okay, I've not paid yet for it, still I have to pay GST on it, because importation from related parties without consideration also is liable to GST. Another example is I dispose of the assets. I'm giving it off to a NGO or any organization. I'm disposing it off because it's of no use for me. On that also GST will be payable. Now, how is this GST payable? I have taken the ITC, I will reverse my ITC and I will claim depreciation and reverse the ITC. So that is also liable to GST. Clear, Ishan? Isn't C contradicting A? No, C is not contradicting A. It is each separate. So A says something. Now C is saying that, okay, in special circumstances, this will come. So A is a general section and C is a exceptional section. When we are importing any service which is taxable supply under GST, but that are provided free of cost, like Spotify and MS Office. So how we are charging GST? So import of services for, there should be a consideration. So this clause, what we read 7(1)(b), import of services for a consideration, business or non-business. So if I'm importing, if there is a consideration, then GST. Now if you're importing Spotify or MS Office and there's no consideration, then no GST. Okay. Okay. Now we'll get back on the important terms what we are discussing on goods and services. Goods means every kind of movable property. Okay. Goods means every kind of movable property. So if it is immovable property, is it goods? No, it is outside. So from the definition of goods itself, immovable property is gone. So what is goods? All kinds of movable property, but it excludes money and securities. Money and securities are excluded. Money means hard cash, money. So if I exchange 2,000 rupees and get 500 rupees, it is just an exchange of money. It is outside GST. But if there's any charges, like if I have a dollar, If I want to buy $1 and I give something in cash, that exchange is not a goods, not a services, but the transaction charge is levied on top of that. That is a service on that GST will apply. But the prima facie exchange of money, exchange of notes for coins is not a supply, right? And securities also are excluded. Securities का मतलब क्या है? Securities means securities as defined under the Securities Control Regulation Act, okay, which says that all kinds of shares, securities, debentures, bonds, all of that are securities. So when you buy any shares, okay, or you invest in any company and get equity, there is no supply, okay, because it is, you're not buying or selling any goods or services because it's not a goods itself. You're investing money and getting some shares. It is a transaction of security. It is outside the GST scope. So if I deal something in my share market, then my broker charges something. No, sir, what is that? So he doesn't charge on the value of security. He charges on the value of brokerage. So all these additional charges, additional consideration, which is levied on top of money, on top of securities, that is liable. But the prima facie transactions of money and securities are excluded from the scope of goods and services. Okay, so goods includes every kind of movable property other than money and securities, but includes, so specifically it includes actionable claim. What is actionable claim? I have a claim against something like lottery. If I buy a lottery ticket and if I get my number in the jackpot, then I have a right to ask the money. So this right is an actionable claim. So this actionable claim is considered as goods. Then growing crops, grass, and things attached to a farming part of the land when they are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. मतलब क्या है ये समझते? This is coming from the very much same words are there under the Transfer of Property Act. Okay, so GST has combined various allied laws and made so that there is no confusion. So what does this say? Growing crops, grass and things. मतलब ये क्या land पे रहेगा? Land we know is an immovable property, so no GST on that. But when I enter into a transaction that I will agree to buy the growing crops, grass and things, I cannot tell that when I am buying immovable property. You cannot get that escape routes that I'm buying some growing crops, grass and things, so no GST because it's immovable property. You have entered, you have agreed that you will sever it and buy it as a goods. It's just that you cannot take it now because it is still growing, right? You have seen a mango tree and by your estimate, you know that it will give you 200 mangoes, right? So it is still growing. When you have entered into a contract saying that I will buy it at a point of time, then it is liable to GST. It will not come under exclusion and it will be treated as goods, okay? Which are agreed to be severed, which means jo katenge, which you will cut it off before supply or under a contract of supply, okay? Till it will be considered as goods itself. Then services. So goods, we understood goods means anything which is movable property, but it excludes monies and securities, but it includes actionable claim, growing crops, grass and things attached to forming part of the land. Then services. Services means anything other than goods. Very simple. What is movable property? What is immobile property? Is movable property. What is movable property? What is immobile property? Is a movable property. So एक की टोपी उसके ऊपर. Not like that. Goods is specifically defined. Services means anything other than goods, means there should be some services, and but it also excludes monies and securities. But it includes what? It includes activities relating to use of money. Like I said, given that example, exchange of currency, exchange of money, or conversion of money by cash or by any other mode from one form of currency denomination to another, for which a separate consideration is charged. On that, service will apply. On that, service value will be there. On that, GST will apply. So that's the definition of goods or services. जो हम कमीशन पे करते हैं सिक्योरिटीज पे, उस पर जीएसटी लगता है. हाँ, उसके ऊपर लगता है. GST is chargeable on brokerage and not on securities. Correct. Lift. Very good question. Now, building, is a immovable property. The lift inside that building is movable or immovable? If severed, then movable. Lift cannot be severed. Lift can be either disassembled and then reassembled. Lift cannot be severed. Severed means any growing crops is what you can sever. This, if you sever, then it will get cut. So we are not cutting the lift. Okay, so somebody is saying it is immovable. Somebody is saying it's movable. On what basis? Because lift moves, no? From ground floor, first floor, second floor, it moves. So somebody is saying it's movable. Rajiv Kumar Singh, say, GST applicable on sale of purchase of old coins. Yes, on old coins, you're not using it as a currency, right? So you're using it for its numismatic value. Then GST is applicable on that. It will not be treated as cash and it will not be come under the exclusion. Lift is immovable because after removing it from land, it is of no use. No, you can remove it. You can remove it properly and assemble it properly. Second-hand lifts are available. You cannot say that logic, it is immovable. Elevator is not movable. Sir, facility lift can be removed. Lift facility shouldn't come under service. So basically lift, the feature of the lift internally is movable because you want to move from one floor to another floor. But by nature, it is immovable itself. Okay. So it is immovable because it is forming part of the building. Okay. Lift specifically center के road में कोई नहीं रखेगा. It will not be kept inside, just in between a road. It will be part of a building, right? So it is by nature attached to the building itself. So it is an immovable property. Okay. So lift is an immovable property. Because of the feature it is moving, that doesn't mean it is a movable property. It is a immovable property itself. But when you buy lift, that time it is movable. So that time GST will be levied. After you fit it into a building, it becomes immovable. Okay. So don't assume that when I buy lift, it will become movable, so I don't have to pay GST. When you buy, it is movable property, so you have to pay GST. Once it is fitted and part of the building, it will become immovable. Okay. So now we will go to the 8 terms of supply in detail, and then we will understand with some examples. So we'll take a break of 10 minutes and we will discuss we'll come back and meet at 7:30. take up some questions. Under Sale of Goods Act, actionable claims are not goods. Yes, very good observation. Under Sale of Goods Act, actionable claims are not goods, but under GST, they are treated as goods. Okay. Further, you'll see, Mr. Ishan, that not all actionable claims are liable to GST. Under Schedule 3, actionable claims, only betting, gambling, and lottery. These are the three things which are liable, and all other all other actionable claims are not liable to GST. So good observation. There is a difference between Sale of Goods Act and GST to this extent. Please explain para 2 of Schedule 1. Okay. Schedule 1. Para 2 is supply between related persons or distinct persons. So we understood what is a distinct person and who is a related person. We know that if you have any relationship or if you are a related person, then that transactions without consideration also is liable to GST. Now, what all could be these transactions? That I am having a head office in Bangalore. Now I am supplying to some branch in Delhi. So this transfer, even though it is within one entity, can it be treated as no supply? Generally, no, because you will merge both the financials. So there is no separate income tax. Income tax is not there on whatever I sell to my branch. But GST is different. It says that whenever you make any supply to your branch, which is in Delhi, the Delhi is treated as a distinct person. So on this sale, GST will be applicable. Sir, but they are both same entities. No, why double taxation? There will not be double taxation. I will sell him. I will charge GST to him and he will claim the credit. Okay, but there should not be any leakage of revenue. That's the reason GST said that when I supply something to a distinct person, pay GST and that person will claim the credit. Also, see the other scenario. Other scenarios when I'm supplying to my branch. Now this branch is within the same state. Okay, I am from Bombay. I am selling it to my branch who's in Pune. Now for Bombay and Pune, I have one registration. Then it will not be treated as a distinct person. No GST will be chargeable because you cannot charge GST to yourself and you have one GST for both the branches. So Bombay to Pune, if there are no different GST registration, then it will not be treated as a distinct person. But if you are having a separate registration in Bombay and another registration in Pune, then it will be treated as a distinct person. And when you supply something from Pune to Bombay or Bombay to Pune, GST has to be paid. That is the meaning of clause 2, supply between related person or distinct person. Okay, clear, Ishan? I will upload this PPT. Yes, last times and this class, both PPT will be uploaded. Don't worry. Okay, so we were on this aspect of supply. What is goods, what is services, we understood. Now we'll understand the 8 terms of supply. Supply, first is sale. Sale, transfer, barter, exchange, right? So let's start with sale. Sale means what? Transfer of ownership or title to the property from one person to another person for a price. Okay, so there is a transfer of ownership of and the title of property is getting transferred. When I am selling something to you, I am handing it over to you and I cannot ask you to give it back to me. If it is defective, you will return it back, but otherwise it is always the property is being transferred to you. Now you can do anything with it. Okay, like in the Sale of Goods Act also you have seen what is sale under the definition of Sale of Goods Act. It is a contract where the seller transfers or agrees to transfer the property in goods, which means it's an immovable property in goods to the buyer for a price. Okay, that is sale. Sale of laptops by a dealer, sale of food by a restaurant. That is a service, but still, whatever you buy, any commodities you buy is a sale transaction. Now, that's a sale. We understood the sale. What is the primary condition? There should be a transfer of ownership and transfer of and title of the property. And it should be of a movable goods. It should be of goods, and goods are movable. Transfer means what? To convey or remove from one place to another. Okay, here there's no mention of consideration, but it just says what's the meaning of transfer: to move or convey from one place to another place, like transfer from warehouse to go down. Okay, from one showroom to the retail showroom, from one go down to the showroom. These are all examples of transfer. Now, why is transfer covered? Because of the inclusion of distinct person. So when there is a distinct person, I may not get the money from him, right? I may not get the consideration also from him, but there is a supply, because on this transfer, the schedule 1 kicks in and says that when I make a transfer between distinct person, even without consideration, you are transferring. So you cannot say that transfer is not included in the definition of supply, so I will not pay GST even if it is mentioned in schedule 1. So they have covered all the aspects, the legal aspects of the complete scenarios are covered. That transfer is also included under the definition of supply, and it is also included in schedule 1. Okay, so to convey or remove from one place to another is transfer. That is transfer. First one is sale. Then barter. We know what is barter. Barter is exchange of goods or services for other goods or services instead of using money. Instead of using some monetary consideration, non-monetary consideration is given. That is the example of barter. Okay, like a CA consultancy services I'm giving for a services from a doctor. So on barter, no GST, sir. No, it is definitely there. That's why it's included under the 8 terms of supply. Even in barter, GST is there. So when I supply any services and I get consideration in non-monetary terms, I still have to raise the invoice and discharge the GST. Okay. Barter and exchange. Exchange means what? It is act of giving or taking for one another. So I have an old vehicle, I'm selling it. If I sell and buy a new vehicle, I will not get a new vehicle at the cost of my old vehicle. I have to pay something extra. So this is a transaction of exchange. When it's a barter plus some money consideration is involved, this is an example of exchange. So sale, transfer, barter, exchange. Then what? License. What is license? Permission which is granted by competent authority. Excuse me. Permission which is granted by the competent authority to engage in a business or occupation or in any activity which is otherwise lawful, which means this is my property. Now I'm giving to somebody to use. It is illegal, right? Because it's my property. It's unlawful. But because of this license agreement, an unlawful transaction is also given a lawful assent or lawful consent is given. That's how the transaction of license comes in. Permission to enter and use of property is allowed. So this is an example of license agreement. So when you enter into some kind of agreement, you enter into lease and license agreement, right? So licensing is use of property. Then understand the example of lease because it's interrelated. Lease means to make a legal agreement by which money is paid in order to use land, building, a vehicle, or a piece of equipment for an agreed period of time. So similar to license, but lease is generally for movable property. License is for an immovable property. Okay. Then disposal, we know what is disposal: sale, pledge, giveaway, or consumption or disposition of a thing, wherein if you sell something, you get money, but disposal is something where you give it off and you're disposing it off, and there is no kind of guarantee that you are responsible for it. In case of sale, if there is a defect, you are responsible. But in case of disposal, if something defect happens also, the other person cannot come to you. So if you're disposing of your laptop to some NGO, the NGO cannot come back and say it's not usable. They will have to repair it by themselves. That's a disposable example. Then rental, agreement to rent something. Okay, so renting of movable property or renting of movable property, both are covered under rent. Okay, what's the difference between lease and license? Lease, I said, is whether possession is transferred along with the right to use property. But in case of license, license is similar to lease, except that the possession is not transferred. Okay, so in case of a lease, the possession is transferred, but in case of license, you're still having it and they can use part of it. So it's a licensing agreement. As per classification in Schedule 2, license, lease, and rental of goods with or without transfer of right to use are covered under supply of services. So we have the schedule 2, right, which gives classification of goods and classification of services. There they've specifically said that license, lease, and rental, these are to be classified as services itself. Okay. Now we understood the 8 terms. Now let's understand some examples. I will read out these examples. Wherever you have doubt, you please raise your doubts. I will answer that at the end of this examples. Mr. A buys a table for rupees 10,000 for his personal use, and he sells it off after 10 months of use to a dealer. Now, will this be treated as liable to GST and GST will be payable? No, this is not considered as supply under GST, as this is not done by Mr. A for furtherance of business, or he's not doing it for the business purposes. So a personal laptop, a personal table which is bought and he's selling it, it will not be treated as business. Second, Mrs. B provides free floor coaching class to its neighboring students as a hobby. It's a supply of service. Consideration is not involved. It is for the purpose of business, because we can tell that it is her business and that's why she teaches it, right? But since there is no consideration involved, it will not be liable to, it will not be treated as a supply, because consideration is a must for supply of goods or services. So in the second example, it is not a supply. Third example, when a new mobile worth rupees 10,000 is purchased in exchange of an old mobile, along with the monetary consideration of 2,000 paid for the said purchase, is an example of exchange, similar to what example I had given you. When a laptop is supplied for rupees 30,000 with a barter of printer. Now I have a printer and I'm supplying it, and it's in a good condition so that I don't have to pay any additional consideration for a laptop. I'm giving off the printer and I'm getting a laptop. Okay, I'm giving off my printer, which is used, but there is a barter which is happening. I'm giving a printer and getting a laptop. Okay, so this is an example of barter. When I am selling the printer, if I am used it for my business, it is in the course of furtherance of business. Then when I sell this printer, okay, I have to charge GST, and the other person who is supplying the laptop, he should also charge GST. So barter doesn't mean that you are bartering, so there is no tax. Barter also is liable to tax because it is also one form of a supply. Katrina Kaif uses the services of a makeup artist. Somebody were asking, what, give me example of import of services. This is a good example. A film actor uses the services of a makeup artist from USA. Now GST is liable to be paid under reverse charge. Okay, so the makeup artist comes, does the makeup, and then goes off. He will not charge GST, but Katrina Kaif has to pay his consideration. She will pay his consideration. Now, who will pay GST on this? Katrina Kaif has to pay because it is her business. Okay, she's into the business of film industry. Now she is into this business. So anybody who's coming, it is for her development of business itself, right? Personal thing is also involved, but it is for her business itself. So she would have been registered anyways. She has to pay GST under reverse charge basis. Now, what if she's brought something and she's not registered? So in that case, is it liable to GST? Yes, it is liable to GST. Not registered, so can she escape? No, she cannot escape. So she will have to register and pay GST on reverse charge. Okay, clear with these examples? Yeah, Chunky Uppal. Things attached to land are forming part of the land. Okay, so things attached to land are forming part of the land. Let us go to the definition of goods so that you will understand this more clearly. Growing crops, grass, and things attached to forming part of the land, that doesn't stop there. Okay, so don't read the definition halfway, read it completely. Forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed. Okay, before supply of what? Supply of that land. So before supply of land, if I'm agreeing to sever some things, okay, suppose एक land के ऊपर, let's take an example of a kind of a say there is a furniture which is there on a land, and I'm agreeing it to sever after the sale of the land, which means I've agreed to remove it. Then this is also treated as goods because I've agreed to sever it later on, not now. So it cannot escape saying that it is attached to the land, so it becomes an immovable property. When if it is agreed before supply, before sale of this land, that it will be severed, then it becomes goods, which is otherwise in the nature of non-goods will become goods because you have agreed to sever it before, right? Similarly, when crops are growing and you know that at the harvest season, you will get it after say 6 months. And today, if you enter into agreement saying that I will buy the land along with the crops, because crops also he has invested something, right? The seller has invested or put the seeds. That's how it will be growing. And you know that you will buy it. So land, if it is brought along with the crops, which will be to be severed by you, then it will be treated as goods and it will not be treated as immovable property and it will not escape. Okay, understood? The GST number with different states, so it will be taxable supply. Yes, it will be taxable supply also because it's a distinct person. For a price means consideration. Yes, for a price means consideration. In case of transfer, there is no distinct person, then it is not included. Yes, if there is no distinct person, if it's the same person, you yourself are supplying to yourself in another branch, which is not a distinct person, then it will not be included. So, but what price we get when we supply to a distinct person because it is in a branch of same person with separate registration. Yeah. So that's the reason you have a valuation chapter. The valuation says that in case of supply to related person, you will charge the market value, or which is also popularly the legal term uses open market value. So when you sell it to an outsider, what is the price you charge? That price you will have to charge to this for this transaction between related distinct persons. Supply of second-hand goods are also treated under GST. Yes, supply of second-hand goods also are liable for GST. Compulsory registration. Yes, Chunky, compulsory registration लेना पड़ेगा. What is reverse charge mechanism? We'll understand under charge. As of now, understand that generally when a supply is happening between a supplier and a recipient, who pays GST? Supplier. When you are buying some goods from a shop, the shopkeeper is selling goods to you, right? So he will charge GST. But in case of reverse charge, the buyer will pay. In all conditions, no. In specified conditions, I will pay the reverse charge instead of the supplier paying it. Please explain second example. Okay, second example. Let's go to the example now. Now, Mrs. B provides free coaching to neighboring students as a hobby. It is supply of service. Now, for any supply, what are the three conditions? It should be supply of goods or service. First condition is met. She is supplying service. It should be for a consideration. Is it met? Free hai to fir consideration nahi hai. No consideration. So limb falls there itself. But let us test the third condition. Is it in the course of furtherance of business? We'll understand the definition of business. Even if you're doing it for a hobby and you're doing it as a regular practice, it will still be treated as a business. So first limb and third limb is satisfied. But since second limb of consideration is not satisfied, it will not be falling under the definition of supply. Okay. For computation of GST, we have different chapter. Yes, we have a separate chapter for that. Not a separate chapter as such. The rate as such is not to be studied at this level. Rate will be there in the final level, but in the question, they will give you what is the GST rate for this product. So you can apply that rate. Okay. So are you with me? We are moving further with very technical things, but very important chapter on supply now. Okay. Now consideration. We said consideration. Yeah, consideration kya hai? Consideration means anything what you get in return. Okay, it means payment. Now this payment does not mean money itself. Okay, that this we are clear. So I had explained, that consideration and monetary consideration is different. Monetary consideration, it should be in money, but only consideration mean it could be in anything. Okay. Consideration also can be non-monetary, that is either money or in kind. Monetary value for any act of forbearance is what is the definition of consideration. consideration always need not flow from the recipient. It can be from third party also. So if the recipient is not paying, but anybody else is paying, that is also treated as consideration. However, in the valuation, you'll see that consideration does not include the subsidy which is given by central government or state government. Okay, so I am selling some goods. Say the school season has started here. So I have to supply bags to a school. Okay, now the bag costing is 100 rupees. Now the students cannot pay. So there is the central government who's saying that, okay, you supply back to him because I have to anyways give bags to my government school students. You supply back to them at 40 rupees instead of 100 rupees. 60 rupees, I will give you subsidy. So my sale price is how much? It is actually 100 itself. 40 I am collecting from students and 60 from the government. So on full 100, should I pay GST? Actually, yes, because the consideration is 100. Only what I said in above paragraph, it could be consideration can be coming from third party. So this is a consideration which is coming from third party. So should I include it? Generally, yes. But there is a specific exclusion which says that any subsidy received from the central government or state government is not considered as a supply. So only on that 40 rupees, I have to pay GST. So come to the next point then. Will subsidy given by Melinda Gates Foundation be treated as a consideration or no? Like this example of 100 rupees, I'm giving bags of 100 rupees. Okay. Now Melinda Gates Foundation comes and say, you don't charge the students 100 rupees, you charge 40 rupees. Melinda Gates Foundation will give you 60 rupees. So in such example, on what value will you charge the GST? Mrs. Varsha Shetty, your point is correct. Agriculture produce without process are exempted from GST. Yes, without processes are exempted. Come on. I need answers on point number 5. चंकी yes consideration ये शंकरन 100 rupees इनवॉइस जो बनेगा उस पर लगेगा. इनवॉइस आप कितना का बनाओगे वही तो बात है. what will be your invoice value? That subsidy is not excluded in the value of supply. It is not a subsidy flowing from the government. Very correct. Should GST should be charged on 100. Shreya, class इसी time पे रहता है या every alternative days Monday, Wednesday and Friday इसी time पे रहता है. Full value including subsidy, no supply if without consideration. No supply without consideration. Which what? There is a consideration of 40 rupees. So my question is, will you charge GST on 40 or 100? Divyanshi, my question is, Melinda Gates Foundation is saying, my question, you understood my question? I'll repeat the question. I am supplying bags to school students for 40 rupees. Now my selling price is actually 100. Now 60 rupees is coming from Melinda Gates Foundation. So what will be the value on which you will charge GST? Okay, now the question is clear. Okay, so few people are still confused that it will be on 40, few are saying 100, few are saying on 60. No, 60 cannot be the case because 60 I'm getting subsidy. So either it will be 40 or 100. So subsidy, when it is received from central government or state government only, is excluded. So in my previous example, I had charged GST only on 40, but in this case, Melinda Gates is not a central government. Okay, so I will charge on 100 rupees itself. 40 is coming from the school and 60 is coming from Melinda Gates Foundation. So I will have to charge GST on 100 itself. I have to just charge GST on whole 100 rupees value. Okay. Next, a deposit given in respect of supply of goods or services shall not be considered as a payment unless the supplier applies such deposit as consideration for the said supply, which means if I am getting any deposit, deposit is not part of a consideration because the nature of deposit is you get a deposit and you will repay it. Okay, you'll repay it once the terms of the thing are completed. Like always, I explain with some practical understanding so that you can remember it. I am a manufacturer of electric items. Now I have to appoint distributors. But to appoint distributors, I will collect deposit from them. So on this deposit is a transaction of money. Why am I getting this deposit? Because I will sell him the goods in the future. So will you treat this deposit as a consideration and charge GST on it? No, it can't be charged because deposit nature itself is you will keep it as a deposit, and once the distribution agreement is there, you will return it back once the agreement is completed. So this is a deposit. This is not towards the sale of goods. For sale of goods, he will pay you separate consideration when you raise the invoice. So on this deposit, no GST, but say the other person has defaulted after some period of say 1 year or 1.5 years, he's defaulted in some payment. Now I'm using the deposit to set off my payments for my sale. In that event, when I offset this deposit, that is the time it will be treated as supply, and then GST will be paid on the deposit also. Until then, it will not be treated as supply. Okay. Then consideration has to be quid pro quo, which means there has to be the quid pro quo meaning itself is something in return or something for something, right? I'm giving him something and I'm getting something. That is called as quid pro quo, which means I am giving something and I'm getting something in return. Now, this something in return can be monetary or non-monetary. So that's why when I gave you example of this donation to a NGO, I'm giving something to the NGO. Now, this NGO is not giving anything to me in return, neither am I expecting something in return. So there is no consideration. That's why it's a disposal, right? But Schedule 1 says you pay GST. If Schedule 1 wouldn't have mentioned, I wouldn't have paid GST, right? So consideration means generally there should be a quid pro quo. If I give something, I have to get something in return. Okay. Please explain 6th point again. A deposit given. Ishan said deposit given is a deposit means I'm getting something as a deposit for some performance. So on this deposit, GST is firstly not payable, right? Because deposit is not consideration for the sale. It's a deposit for a security purposes, right? So on this deposit, no GST. But if the deposit is treated by the supplier and adjusted with my supply, then only it will be treated as liable to GST. Okay. Now, considerations, there are some clarifications. Donations, are they treated as consideration? As we said, no. Generally, they are one-sided. The receiving entity does not give back anything. However, if there exists a quid pro quo, which means if you say that I will donate to you, but you have to do some marketing for me, or you have to mention my name in the vehicle which I give you. I'm giving or donating you a vehicle for usage of your NGO activities. On this, you have to mention that this is donated by, and not as a matter of courtesy, but as a matter of contract, as a matter of my publicity you're doing it. Then I'm expecting something for it, then it will be treated as a consideration. But if the name of the donor is just expressed as a matter of gratitude, saying that, okay, donated by Infosys Foundation, just as a small letter, not as a marketing tool, then it will not be treated as a consideration. Okay, so this is also clarified in a circular issued by the department, wherein they've said that will you treat the donation as a consideration or no. They've said that if the name of the donor is displayed as an expression of gratitude, saying just thanksgiving, and public recognition of donors' philanthropy, and is not aimed at giving publicity to the donor, then there is no supply of service for a consideration, right? Then there is another example of artworks. Now, artworks which are exhibited in galleries or art exhibitions, you'll find a lot of artists' work is displayed there. So on that, will there be any GST liable? Depends on the case. Most generally, no, because when the artists display there, they don't get any consideration. Only their artwork is displayed. So nothing is received by the artist for display, so there is no supply. But when this artist's work is bought by somebody, they will pay consideration for that. On that, GST will apply. Just for the display, GST will not be applicable. Okay. Now, definition of business. What is business? We said business. One of the terms was consideration. We understood consideration, and it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Okay, when we say in the course of furtherance of business, let us understand what is business first. Business means any trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, or vocation, which means any trade, buying or selling, any commercial activities, manufacturing activities, professionals, chartered accountants, software consultants, engineers, all of them are doing business. And vocation means anything which is done as a part of interest. Like, what is a vocation? Any kind of teaching is vocation, right? Because it doesn't fit in any trade or profession. Now, that example of hobby, okay, if she's doing it for a hobby and if she's charging something, that will come under a vocation. She's not a professional teacher, but she's doing out of her hobby. A teacher teaching it for a passion is all covered under vocation. So all of this are covered under business: trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, etc. Now, it could be incidental or ancillary activities, like if I'm buying and selling goods, and to buy and sell, when I'm selling something, I am also transporting. My main business is not transporting, but when I'm selling goods, I have to, sometimes I will have my own transport vehicle, I have my own truck to deliver the goods. So incidental or ancillary activities are also covered. So I cannot say that only on the goods I will charge GST, on this truck service I will not, on this transportation I will not charge, not correct. On this truck also I will have to charge GST. Okay, then whether or not there is volume, frequency, continuity, or regularity, which means that whether you are doing it one time, one off of a time, still you have to pay GST. Okay, whether or not there is volume, frequency, continuity, or regularly, you're doing one time also, if there is substantial, we'll see some examples that some person is doing one time. So everybody is doing a one-time activity. You cannot say he's there in business. Depends on the transaction, depends on the impact. It depends on the business acumen that it will be treated as a business or no. Supply or acquisition of goods, including capital goods and services, right? So when I buy any capital goods also, it will be liable for GST. Can't say that capital goods are not liable for GST. You cannot say that. Then provision of facilities to members of a club or association. We saw, no, 7(1)(a). Association to members is liable to as a supply. Now it is treated as a business also. It is treated as a business also, and it is treated as a supply also. So provision of facilities to members of a club or association is liable as business. Then addition of business, admission of business to any premises means when I make any entry to a exhibition or event, am I doing any supply? it is a business because you're giving the permission to enter. It is treated as a business itself. So admission of persons to any events is also business. Then services supplied by a person as a holder of an office, which means what? This covers the services of a director. Now, directors who are not whole-time directors, they will come and attend the meeting or attend the committee meetings. They are holding the position of an office of a director. Office here means that position. So services supplied by a person as a holder of an office is also treated as a business. Okay, so holder of a director and he's getting some director sitting fees, that is also treated as business. Services by a race club. Okay, so race club running of horses is also liable as treated as a business. Activities undertaken by the central government, state government, or local authority. Why? Because state government also involved in some commercial activities like renting of immovable property for commercial purposes, right? They are also doing some non-governmental activities, so they are also falling under the definition of business. So that's the definition of business. Now, business way, as I said, let's understand with some examples. Ramesh sold a car which he has using for his personal use. Will it be treated as a supply? One-time activity, sir, it will be treated as supply, but no, it's not a supply since it is not made in the course or furtherance of business. Okay, so one-time activity, he's bought a car, now he's selling it. He's not using it for his business, he was using it for his personal business. So not a supply. Contrast this example with Shah Rukh Khan. Now Shah Rukh Khan is an actor. Now he does some painting and he sells them over. However, the consideration is donated to a charity. So the second leg, but see, first is sold as painting. Will it be liable to GST? So this is also one-time activity, but sale of painting qualifies as a supply because his painting has some value, even though it doesn't make sense to anybody, but because of his brand, he will get a consideration which will be recognized. So because of that, it has a recognition value. That's the reason, even though it's a one-time activity, it will be treated as a business. Same car sold, it's not a business, but one-time activity of a painting sold will be treated as a business, right? GST has to be paid. No, sir, why GST has to be paid? He's given it for charity. Charity is the second leg, right? First is he has sold, no? So when he sells it, and if it is supply, then GST is applicable. Then the consideration what he gets, if he gives to charity, no problem. But first leg is supply per se is liable to GST. Then Mahima sold her old ornaments to Tanishq Jewelry. So old ornaments sold, will it be liable to GST? Not to supply, same, since it is not made in the course of furtherance of business. Recovery of food expenses from employees. Now there's a company, it's running some canteen. Now kind of mesh. Okay, now in this canteen, you have collecting from the employees some money. Okay. Will it be treated as business? Yes, it will be treated as in the course of furtherance of business because you are selling food indirectly. Even though caterer is there, caterer will be supplying. Now you will make payment to the caterer and you will collect money from the employees. This is treated as supply in the course of furtherance of business. Very tricky, no? Please go through this example and let me know if you have any questions. Say Infosys owns a foundation and it donates to its foundation. And if this name is displayed, will it GST applicable? Yeah. Good example, Jeevan. So if Infosys donates something and it doesn't use as a marketing stint, it just says that I've given it to you. Now you use it for anything. I don't want my name, but the person is still saying that who donated by Infosys. So it's only as a matter of courtesy, he's mentioning his name. So GST will not apply. But if Infosys says, if you do put my name across everywhere and you will market my name, then I will give you, then it will be treated as a supply. So जो एग्जीबिशन हॉल वाले आर्टवर्क डिस्प्ले में करते हैं, चार्ज लेंगे तो उस पर जीएसटी लगेगा? हाँ, अगर चार्ज लेंगे तो जीएसटी लगेगा. So why they who are taking tuitions not paying GST? Because there is a threshold limit. So if those people are crossing the threshold limit, then they will pay GST. Otherwise, they for services the limit is generally 20 lakhs. Up to 20 lakhs rupees, they don't have to pay GST. So that could be the reason that any people who are taking private tuitions are not paying GST. So if person inside the old age home makes some goods and sells it to raise funds, will it be charged under GST? Prima facie, yes. If he is selling any goods, then it is liable to GST. Then you also have to see threshold limit. If the value for goods is up to 40 lakh rupees, then he doesn't have to pay. And if those item products itself are exempted, then he can sell for any value for up to any without any limit, because on those goods itself, some goods are there like handicraft products on which GST is not applicable at all. If he's selling something like that, then no GST. But as per schedule and supply can be without consideration. So in this case, there is no supply. Okay. So in our example of Infosys giving donation, okay, they are giving donation. They're not giving their old assets. They're not disposing. Schedule 1 says only for disposal. Giving a donation is not disposal. If I sell a asset, then GST, it is a supply liable for GST. But I'm donating something, then I'm not disposing. I'm giving off something. I'm giving off money, right? Then it's not a supply. So there are two distinctions. Old assets given off, disposal, GST is applicable, yes. But donation given in monetary terms, no GST. Okay, excellent. So let's move ahead. We understood this schedule 1 very clearly, already covered. Now there was a mention of related persons. What are the related persons? Let's start that. Related person means persons are officers or directors of one another's business. You're a director, and the company is related, and each other's business we are director. I am director in your company, you are director in my company. So these two companies also will be related companies. Then such persons are legally recognized partners. Partners and the company partners and the LLP partners and the partnership firm are related persons. Such person are employee and employer and employee. Employee is treated as a related person of the company. He's an employee, but yes, he is a related party. Okay. Any person directly or indirectly owns, controls, or holds 25% or more of the outstanding voting stock of shares or both, which means I'm holding more than 25% equity shares, or if I'm holding 10%, but I'm having voting rights of 25%. How is it possible? In company law, you'll read that you can have equity shares with differential voting rights. One share, but equity, you can have three equity, one share is equal to one vote, but you can have equity shares with different voting rights also, wherein one share equal to 3 votes. That kind of voting rights also can be given. So either you're holding normal voting rights, which is more than 25%, or having differential voting rights, but number of shares doesn't matter. Where you're having voting rights more than 25%, then it will be treated as related person. Then one of them directly or indirectly controls the another. So one of them is directly or indirectly controlling the other. How? By giving loans. I am having a director in the board, right? So if I'm having a director in the board, I am indirectly controlling the affairs of the company. Any action to be taken, you will have to discuss with me, then you have to take it. So in that case also, it will become a related party. One of them directly or indirectly controls the other, which means also means that one example. Other example could be one person is not having shares, but he is making decisions for the company. Okay, if he says only things will move, then also it will be treated as a related person. How it is established? It is established by terms. It will establish how the guarantee is given. Like if I'm giving guarantee to you, so that bank will give you a loan, right? And then for I'm giving a personal guarantee in the bank, my name will be entered. So then also it can be established that there is a related party transaction. Both of them are directly or indirectly controlled by a third person. There is one person who's controlling me and is controlling other person also. So these two parties, okay, A is controlling B and A is controlling C. So A and B are related, B, A and C are definitely related. Now A and C also will be related persons. Okay. Then together they directly or indirectly control a third person, or they are members of the same family. I and my friend, both of them together are holding 51% shares in a company. Okay. Or 25% also is enough, because they have said that 25% or more of the outstanding voting stock, more than 25% we are controlling, both of us put together are related parties. Okay. And last leg is they are members of the same family. So members of the same family are also related persons. Can a restaurant registered under composition scheme charge GST? That's a big issue. A restaurant under composition scheme cannot charge GST, but a restaurant not under composition scheme, under regular scheme, also will charge the same GST rate itself. So it is advisable that restaurants who are registered under composition move out of composition and come under regular scheme, because the rate for composition and non-composition is same of 5% for any restaurant service. Holding and subsidiary companies are also related. Yes, holding is when, because more than 51% becomes holding, and here the limit is 25%. So definitely it is a related person itself, because it is holding 51% plus and the threshold is only 25. So holding and subsidiary definitely is related person. Supply between related and distinct, we have discussed this. Registration basic understanding, I told you. Now registration basic understanding is this, that if you are in one state and having multiple branches, all of this you can have one registration, or you could have separate registration saying that you are having a business verticals. So you can have geographical verticals or various business related verticals. One is into wholesale business, one into retail business. Various distinctions are possible. So when you are having two separate registrations in one state, right, then it will be treated as distinct persons. But if you're having 10 branches and you have only one registration, then all of this 10 will be treated as one registration, then they are not treated as distinct person. To be a distinct person within a state, okay, you should have separate registrations. So that's what it says, distinct person, the establishments of a person with separate registrations, whether within the state, union territory, or in different states, are considered as distinct persons. Where a person is having a registered establishment in a state, has another establishment in another state, whether registered or not, are also treated as establishment of distinct persons. Okay. So within the state, separate registration. Outside the state, no separate registration. They are also still treated as a distinct person. Stock transfer between distinct persons will qualify as a supply, but stock transfers within the same state will not be considered as supply if it is within a state. Okay. Supply of goods or services between employer and employee, Schedule 3 exceptions. So employer and employee, what we said, employer and employee is a related person, but Schedule 3 gives the exception that gifts by employer to employee up to rupees 50,000 rupees. So up to 50,000 in a year, if you're giving any gift, on that no GST. But if you're giving gifts above 50,000 rupees, apart from salary, of course, gifts are apart from salary, bonus, PF, all of this is part of your employee's contract of paying him in terms of his emoluments. But if you're giving anything above that, you can give him. But up to 50,000 you give, it's fine. Above 50,000 if you give, then you have to pay GST on that. In course of employment, yes, but still gifts are not because of his employment. Whatever is there in his employment, you have already given in his employment letter. In employment letter, you didn't mention that you will give gifts. You have given it extra, okay, to encourage him, whatever reasons. So above up to 50,000, you give him free things. Above 50,000, if you give, it will be chargeable. Sir, stock within same state and registered, then also not supply. Yeah. Same state and registered also no supply. Correct. So that is an important point here. Stock transfer within the same state will not be considered as supply. Is there any charges for registration under GST? No, there is no charges for registration under GST. Okay, so let's proceed. Principal and agent. Okay, so this is very important. Supply of goods by a principal to an agent without consideration, where the agent undertake to supply such goods on behalf of the principal is considered a supply because of this inclusion in Schedule 1, right? Now, only supply of goods is covered, not services, right? Secondly, what is the deciding factor is given in this circular number 57, which says that whether the invoice for the further supply is in the name of principal or agent will decide whether there is a principal and agent relationship. To decide principal and agent and not to take any kind of a planning over there, what is mentioned is supply between principal and agent will be what will be the deciding factor. Just one moment. Okay. So deciding factor is how it is being supplied in the future after the agent gets it. Okay. So this circular clarifies that invoice for the further supply is being issued by the agent in his own name. Okay. Invoice for this further supply is being issued in his own name. Then it falls under para 3 of the schedule 1 and it will be treated as a supply. Okay. Is being issued by the agent in his name. So he is supplying in his name, then there is a transaction of supply between principal and agent even without consideration. Okay. Second case, invoice is issued by the agent to the customer in the name of principal. So I am acting on behalf of the principal and I'm not acting as a separate different person, which means if I'm having the same entity as the principal, then it will not be treated as a supply because either he supplies or I supply. I am giving the invoice of the principal itself, then it is not a supply. But if I'm giving my own invoice as a separate agent, then it will be treated as a supply. Clear? Then goods procured by the agent on behalf of the principal are invoiced in the name of agent. So similarly, reverse case, when the goods are being supplied by the supplier in the name of principal, then no supply. If the goods are supplied in the name of agent, then it's a supply. Okay, simple, various compliance, various points, but simple issue is that are you acting for the principal? Are you on the shelter of the principal? Yes, then no supply. If you are acting independently or you have your own identity, then it's a supply. Clear? Principal agent, del credar agent concept also you have to understand. Who is a del credar agent? Del credar agent means agent who supplies, who acts as a intermediary between seller and buyer. Apart from that, he is getting some doing additional services of ensuring that the buyer pays to the seller. So you are an agent. You are a normal agent. You will find the buyer. I will sell it to him. If it doesn't pay me, I cannot catch the agent. That's a normal agent. But Del Credar agent is a specialized agent who will ensure that the buyer pays to you. That's why he'll take extra commission. Okay. Now, whether Del Credar agent will fall under para 3 will be decided based on our discussion under 57. Now that we understood, now additional charges, what will happen to that? Now, when interest is charged by the Del Credar agent for short-term loan, is to be included in the value of supply. So we have this concept of composite supply, which means that if I'm doing any principal supply and any ancillary supply also will get attached to the composite, the principal supply. Like I will discuss this in detail, but here you understand if I am supplying a air conditioner, principal supply is what? Air conditioner. Now, along with this, I will do installation service also. So installation service, I'm not giving independently. I'm giving air conditioner with installation. So this installation will become part of the main supply of the air conditioner. So this will get merged with the supply of air conditioner. So what will be the GST rate of air conditioner will apply to the supply of installation service also. So it gets merged with the principal supply. Now, if this Del Credar agent charges some interest, then what happens when DCA is not an agent under para? If not, he is not an agent, then it will not be treated as a supply. It will be treated as three links: supply of goods by principal to the recipient, agency services by Del Credar agent to seller or buyer to whomever he charges. He will charge GST, but it will not get added because he is not covered as a under para 3. He is not covered. He's not covered under the assumption that without any charges also GST has to pay. It will not get covered, so it will be treated as an independent supply, and it will be treated as a loan service by the Del Credar agent to the buyer, which means that the full transaction is seller has sold goods to the buyer. The buyer does not have money, but Del Credar agent, though, he has to save, no, because he's taken higher commission, and if he does not pay, the seller will catch him. So buyer says that seller, the Del Credar agent says to the buyer that I will give you some money, you pay it to the buyer, you give it to the seller. For this money, what I'm giving you, I'll charge you interest. So this interest is a separate service, not a service of selling and buying. That's what it says here. Then third scenario, when Del Credar agent is an agent under para 3, wherein he's acting on behalf of the principal, then this interest has to be added. This is supply of goods by the principal to the Del Credar agent and supply of goods by the Del Credar agent to the buyer. Agency service by the Del Credar agent is either to the seller and buyer, and it's a loan service by the Del Credar agent to the buyer. Okay, so here there are 4 limbs. In first case, it is 3 limbs. Any questions still here? Correct. अगर independent behave किया तो ही supply होगा principal and agent. Correct. That's very much clear. So independent behave करेगा तभी supply होगा. He is responsible for bad debts. Yes, he is responsible for bad debts. Yeah. So I think we are done with our class. Any questions till now? So we'll continue in the next class, but I'll give you 5 minutes to ask any questions. What is perquisites? Perquisites is a part, it's kind of salary, but non-monetary. Jesse, car services is being provided. Okay, car driver is being given. So we have this perquisites in income tax also. So that is all covered as perquisites. say read karke do please. Okay. Artwork is simple that when I supply some artwork services, okay, if I am charging something, then GST. If my artwork is getting sold, then GST. If I'm not charging anything for my display, then no GST. When is del credar agent not an agent under para 3? When del credar agent is not selling goods on his own, but he's selling on my behalf, then it is not under para 3. If he's selling independently, then it will be under para 3. Yeah, this is interesting and practical. No MCQ. Yeah, once we finish this chapter, then we'll do MCQ. If del credar agent is providing service that are out of his scope, are they chargeable? Yes, then it is chargeable to GST. If invoice issued by principal, then agent will not be responsible for bad debts. Correct, correct. If invoice is principal, then agent principal itself will be responsible. What if salary plus incentives and incentives more than 50,000? If it is mentioned that salary plus incentives, then it will be covered. Then the value will not apply. So incentives are generally given like leave travel allowance, all of those. So those are all getting covered. So generally gifts are not mentioned. So that's where I've said gifts will be taxable above 50,000. Okay, great then. So we'll continue the discussion on supply. So please read through the chapter of supply. And if you have any doubts, more doubts, you please ask them because there's a lot of things to get covered. We have hardly covered 20 slides out of 40 slides. So more 50% is there. We will cover and we'll discuss on the MCQs in the next class. Happy reading and we'll see you after the weekend on Monday. Have a good weekend. Thank you.